Today I'm going to review the Insta360 RS. There's been quite a few of these videos made. Why watch this one? Because this one is from the perspective of an off-road rider who rides enduro, dual sport, and sometimes adventure. I'm going to tell you which is the right camera for you and whether you should buy this or the GoPro. I used the GoPro Hero 6 and the GoPro Hero 7 for quite a while, and I was quite happy with the way it worked. And so I lost my GoPro Hero 7 and I thought, well, I'll just try and buy a new one. When I started doing the research, I realized getting the 10, 11 is really not that big of an upgrade. There's not that big of a difference between that and the Hero 7. The thing is, you can't really tell the difference. So when I started doing research, I found the Insta360. And the thing that really jumped out at me, it's two cameras in one. And as a small-time YouTuber, how can I pass up the opportunity to maximize my dollars and get as many shots as possible? If you're used to using GoPro, it's the same form factor as a GoPro, and so you can use it in all the same ways. Action cameras are great. Not just because they're waterproof and you can get them right in the action, but because they're small. I can just carry my regular bag. It's so light, I don't even know it's in there, and I can pull it out and get the shot in a second's notice. Let's face it, when I'm riding off-road, I rarely carry this camera with me. It's heavy, it's expensive. I'm worried about banging it into things off-road. I'm worried about getting it wet. And the truth is, when you're riding off-road, weight is your enemy. I have gone through lots of work to slim my kit down, make it as light as possible, and that has made me a better off-road rider. In the first hour, but even more in the fifth hour. When you're tired, trying to throw around extra weight is not a good thing. And that's why action cameras are great to have around. If you watch motovlogging channels, you'll see people mount their cameras to the bars facing backwards, put a selfie stick out in front of them, mount them off the rear of the bike, or they'll mount them off the side of the bike like this. But the truth is, if you're riding off-road in the trails that I like to ride, having things hanging off the front, the side, the back is just gonna smack into trees, ruin the camera, get tangled up in brush, slow you down, and cause all kinds of havoc.
You go both, huh? No.
The most common angle that I like is the chin mount, because it gets the line of sight close to your eyes. It feels like you're really on the bike and you're really riding, and the helmet stabilizes the ride, and you just look around and it shows exactly what you want to see. Now, you can also use a chest mount, but with the 4K lens or a GoPro, you're gonna find that because on an enduro bike, you do a lot of sitting and standing, it's not going to be that useful. Because if you set it for standing, then when you sit, it's not going to be usable, and vice versa. But that's where the 360 mod has a little bit of an advantage. So here's the chest mount. Click it into place and gives you a different perspective. One of the things is when you put your helmet on, it's hard to see this on the status lights and see how it's running. So you kind of start it and then you just assume that it's running because you really can't see it. So one of the challenging things about capturing good off-road footage is just the fact that you move around so much on the bike that it's hard to capture all of the angles and all of the situations. So obviously when you're sitting here, There's a lot of bike in the shot if you're using a chest mount, and you can't see the trail so well. But when you stand up, when you're going fast in your attack position, you shift your body right over the front like this, and you shift your hips back. And so if you're using a helmet mount, you'll find that the only thing you can see is the front fender, and sometimes not even that. And that's because you're riding so aggressively over the front, and then you can't really get a sense of what the bike is doing. So in that situation, a chest mount is kind of nice because it still captures the bars and what's going on, and then also what's happening in front. Naturally, if you're using a bar mount, it's not as pleasing when you get over the front of the bike like that, as if you're sitting back here in a standard riding position. Most films are shot on 35 to 50 millimeter. Because that looks the most natural to us. Some YouTube productions will rely on just GoPros. This is what it looks like when it's shot from a GoPro. It's far away, it's impersonal, and there's no separation between the background and myself. Honestly, it gets a little fatiguing when productions only use GoPros because they really weren't meant to sit in a stationary place and be used like a regular camera. 35 or 50 millimeter brings you closer to the subject and feels much more personal. You can see there that GoPro, or this 4K equivalent, is considered to be about 16 millimeter. It's much preferable to hold a GoPro on a stick like this and talk to it like this, rather than being on a tripod far away from you. However, it comes with a selfie stick, and the selfie stick is meant to be used. Run it out here, and everything looks much more natural. It's a much more natural shot. However, you can't get around the fact that it is a 7.2 equivalent millimeter focal length. So it's going to be wide. And just embrace that. There are pros and cons to this. Remember how I said that your eyes basically see in a 35 to 50 millimeter focal length? Well, that's true, but it's only part of the story. We don't see in a frame. We see all of this. We see everything around. How many times have you taken a video and been just hauling butt down the trail, and you were like, that's gonna be some exciting footage, and you got back and it looked slow. It looked like you were barely moving. And this is one of the advantages of the 360 camera. Because of the wide angle and being able to reframe it, it takes in all of that. Next, you're going to see footage of the 4K. I will also add in footage of the 360 camera footage. You're gonna feel the speed and feel the environment much better.
Starting with the GoPro Hero 7 footage in 2.7K 60 with no hyper smooth, it gives you a sense of rawness and motion. This is the 4K lens mod in 60 frames per second, and you can tell how much tighter of an angle it is. It's not as wide angle as the GoPro. Next we see the 5.7K 30 frames per second flow state with the Insta360 mod, and it's so much smoother than the other two, even if you put hyper smooth on the GoPro. You can really see what's going on, and you get a sense of the speed and what's happening. Here is the GoPro again. It's a little shaky, but it has this rawness. It has a very pleasing colors. I think the colors are superior. Here's the 4K lens again, using flow state this time in post. And in this situation, the colors are not too bad. Here we have the flow state again, and in the 360 mod, and it is just so much smoother, so buttery smooth, and it gives you a sense of your surroundings, and you can really take in the scene the way that you see it with your eyes. You can tell that the bike is moving underneath me, but the camera doesn't move. The camera stays solid, and that gives a very pleasing perspective.
Another interesting thing about 360 footage is the fact that you can reframe it in post. Now, this can be a pro and it can be a con. It's a lot more work to process 360 footage, but you get a better and a different product.
Been at it already, had my tarot read. Things are looking up for me, that's what my tarot said. Been pumping out pheromones and wearing red. Young Jerry Lolliver king, but they're not aware of it. $40 to show money, that's what they stole from me. Blow it all bone, and guess I roll funny. Go find me a snow bunny, ask if this cold world's making her nose runny. She melted, I wear a cape that is velvet. Couldn't see it, she felt it. See it all like I'm Elvis, move my hips like I'm Elvis. I don't pitch it, I sell it. Couldn't picture me jealous, turning fans into zealots, tuning in when I tell it. There were 15 people at the gig, saying, oh my God, what fun this is. Did it all, did it right, did it big. Yeah, buddy, we were loving it. New cards, new deck, new life. King of Cups, he comes up right.
One of the interesting things that people don't tell you, with 360 footage, you have the ability to digitally alter the focal length a little bit within reason.
There are two functions here, and both of them zoom in and zoom out. So at default view mode, you can look at these and see the lines are not straight, they're curved, which is one of the things that kind of has irritated me about a lot of 360 footage. Is I can see these curves, I can see the distortion, and it kind of bothers me. Now, this one here essentially just moves the camera closer and farther away. We're not changing the actual distortion of the image. If you use natural view, this one here, you can see these lines are straight now. This number here is 0, which means it's not distorting the image like this. It is just straight out of camera. And then we can zoom in and out like this. But if we get too far out, you can see that you get quite a lot of distortion on the edges of the frame, and it's really not pleasing. So you kind of want to stick with that. Another thing that you really need to know how to use, especially when you're using a helmet camera. So you want to select direction lock. So if direction lock is not selected, as you turn, the camera will stay in the same orientation, in the same direction. As I turn to the right, the camera is pointed in the same direction, and now I'm looking at my face. So to avoid that, you want to turn direction lock on, and now it is going to point in the same direction as the camera is pointing at all times. So then you set something where you feel like it's going to look good, and then you can have a look at that.
Now, one of the cool things about the Insta360 is the ability to act as a cameraman. If you ride alone like me, you might be wanting some footage of yourself. And I've set up the A7 a few times and a GoPro, and the thing is, it's hard to get engaging footage, but this is much better. You just set it here by the side of the road, ride by a couple of times, and pan it and frame it up later. With the pan feature, it makes it even look like you have a cameraman when you don't. My reels I use with that get way more likes, views, and clicks than the ones I use of only helmet footage. Be careful though if you set your camera up like that and walk away, because it can fall over, and I've damaged the lens, unfortunately, a couple of times. So in the first week that I owned this camera, I was climbing with my kids and I barely touched the lens into a rock and it made a small nick, and I was pretty unhappy about that. And then not too long later, I set it up on the tripod just as you see, and a gust of wind came, blew it over, and the lens slammed into a rock and made an even bigger nick. And now sometimes you see two dots that float around in the scene. I had a GoPro for many years and I have never damaged the lens, even though it's a quick change and it's easy to switch. The thing about these is you have to buy the whole new unit, as far as I can tell. I've never seen anyone that actually just changes these lenses. And unfortunately, the unit by itself is stupidly expensive.
How much is this, Marie?
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
The whole camera itself is about $450 US. And the thing is, you would think, if you do the math on it, of the 4K one is about half that. It's about $250 US. So you think, well, this unit is probably worth about $250 US. But they want more than that. They want basically $400 for this unit right here.
It sounds like a get-rich-quick scheme.
Yes, thank you. You will get rich quick. We all will.
These other units here, they're only worth about $100, I guess, or even less. So it's kind of ridiculous, actually, the whole pricing scheme on that. The fact that if you damage one of these, you can't easily fix it. You're just better off buying a whole new camera. But it's an action camera. It might get some dings on it, and that is what it is. A couple of things I'd like to talk about that may or may not be well known. One of the things is sound. Many vloggers talk about the sound. Here's the deal. The sound out of an action camera is not going to be good. Period. Full stop. Now, the media mod for the GoPro seems to be an advantage, but I don't bother with it. And here's why. I shoot with this little unit right here, a Zoom F2, and it gets 32-bit float audio. It only costs about $200 US, and it's small enough that it just fits in your bag anytime. The only disadvantage to it is it isn't waterproof, and you have to sync the sound in post. But the truth is, it's not a big deal. Sound quality between the Insta360 and the GoPro. I would give the edge to the GoPro. And here's the deal. When I'm riding on this motorcycle, when I switched cameras, I was listening to the sound and I was like, there's something weird about my bike. Is it broken? Because it gives this kind of raspy, like blah, blah, blah. The motorcycle sounds better in a GoPro. Something else I'd like to mention to you that's pretty hard to find online, doesn't really relate to bikes, but this 360 lens doesn't work underwater. People will give you different versions, like, oh, it kind of works if you point it in this direction, this direction. The thing is, there will be the way it stitches together right through the middle of this side of the camera or this side of the camera. You'll have your face stitched together with a rock or something or a fish. Bottom line, it doesn't work. So just use, if you're using this, just use the 4K one underwater. To make a 360 camera work underwater, you need a special housing. And that housing has air in it and allows you to see 360. And so you would need the X2 or the X3. I have never seen a housing for this camera. So if you intend to use it underwater, this is not the camera to have. Either an X2 or X3, or just use your 4K lens mod.
So with a little searching, I was able to find this dive case for the Insta360 One R360 camera. And it claims to work underwater. And then when you scroll down to the comments, basically you have a bunch of people saying that the stitch line is very visible. Basically, I would return this if I could. It makes it visible, unusable VR, etc., etc. Here's the video of the guy where he shows the stitch line in the shot and how bad it is. So it seems to me like with this particular camera, you cannot have an underwater case and remove the stitch line.
Now, which one should you get? Should you get a GoPro or this? The thing is, when I first got it, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use my 4K lens the same way I've used GoPro because I'm happy with the product. I like how it comes out. And then I'm going to use this for creative stuff. I'm gonna use it for stitching things together, making some cool reels, which is really fun. It's really cool to do. And being able to adjust things in post means you can do cool transitions and stitch things together. Here's the deal. I basically haven't used the 4K version. I've used this all the time because I found that even the way that I was using the 4K one with the GoPro on my helmet, this is better. And you can see the comparison between the video and you can see why I use it this way and why this is better. So this one basically sits in my bag and I only use it for underwater or specific types of shots that I want to get. So should you get the Insta360 One RS Twin Edition, or should you just go get the X2 or X3? Well, I've never used an X2 or X3, so I really can't answer that question. But I can tell you that I really like the form factor. Being able to put that on my helmet and use it the way that I use a GoPro is really nice. I really like that. And so I'm not gonna be running out trading this for an X2 anytime soon. I noticed that when you try and mount an X2 on your helmet, if you mount it vertically the way that most people mount that camera, it sticks up in your line of sight. And the thing I like about this is this just barely sticks up. You can see the status symbol. You can see it blinking red. You know that it's running. You know that it's on. You can see the button, but it's not intrusive. It doesn't get into your vision or change your experience other than the weight that you feel on the helmet. And that's what I like. And I'm glad that I don't have to give that up. I know that there are ways to turn the X3 or X2 sideways and do different things with it. And that would be something that would be interesting to experiment with and see. I hope this review has been helpful for you and you're able to learn and make a better decision in the future about your next action camera. If you have any more questions, drop those in the comments below. I'll try to answer them. And like and subscribe and join us again next time on Expat on Two Wheels.